Hello, hello, hello. All right, so my talk might cut a little bit into the Q&A session, so that's why I'm just going right ahead and with the presentation. So today we are going to build a virtual DOM, but first we are going to look a little bit what it is. So a little bit about myself first. My name is Marc, and this is where you can find me on Twitter. That's where I'm most active. So if after this you still have questions that I can't answer here, or you just want to talk in general, just hit me up there. I'm Dev Lead at We Are Developers, where I help organize conferences such as our World Congress in July, which is super cool. I'm co-organizer of the Vue chapter. It's a Belgian chapter of Vue.js. And I'm most recently student pilot, which takes up all of my time, which I don't spend working. So if there's any aviation geeks here, hit me up later. We can talk for hours about this stuff. All right, so let's take a look at virtual DOM. Well, what is it? Virtual DOM is a document object model, but what does it mean? So it's a programming interface for HTML and XML documents, and it represents a document as a tree. So you have a node, and then you have one or more children, and then this could have one or more children. And until the end, there's nothing more to do than just render out whatever it is that is to render out, an image, a text, whatever. And it can be accessed and manipulated via JavaScript. And this is how a DOM looks like, the DOM we all know and love. This is actually the DOM of Vue3.org. No, Vue.org, I think. Vue.js.org, yeah, sorry. Official Vue.js website. You can see here some containers like the app and the VP app, which then have children and so on and so on. So this is what we are going to build on. Now, okay, so now we have a little bit of a picture of what is a DOM. Let's see what is a virtual DOM. And it's actually what the name suggests. It's a virtual representation of the actual DOM. So this could be, for example, JavaScript objects, which is exactly what we are going to do today. And this thing lives in the browser, or in the memory of the browser, and it is synchronized with the actual DOM. And this is what Vue.js uses under the hood, and also some other frameworks. But for example, Petit Vue doesn't use virtual DOM, which is fine. Now, you might ask yourself, okay, but some use it, some don't use it, but why should we use it? Or why do we have virtual DOM? Especially in the morning, we heard Avenue say it has a lot of performance overhead, or some performance overhead. But let's take a look. So the great thing here is it decouples the rendering logic from the actual DOM. And it's easier to programmatically manipulate and inspect the whole thing if we want to do something custom. It's also easier to reuse outside of the browser. For example, if we do a native mobile app, or for example a WebGL renderer. I heard Avenue once answer a question in an interview where he said that someone built based on the Vue 3 virtual DOM, a WebGL renderer, which is pretty cool. All right, before we start building this thing, because we take a look at the actual DOM. What is it that we need to build here? So let's take a look at this very simple HTML markup. And what do we have here? So we have these things that we call tags, right? So we need to represent tags in our virtual DOM. So let's just write it down. We need tags. What else do we need here? These are attributes. It could also be a function, like an on-click event or something like that. So let's just call this properties. And then we have the last part, which is our content. But we're not going to call it content because it's a tree, so it's just the tree has children. We just call it children. But as you can see in this example, children isn't the most intuitive way of putting it, because it could be just text, it could be just one item in there, or it could be various children. So in the last part, it makes most sense to call it children, but this is how it's called. All right, so to create nodes, we have this H function or hyperscript, which means just JavaScript that produces HTML. So let's take a look at what we can create with this. So I represent here 3 different things we can do. Here you can see in the third parameter, or the third argument here, it's a text. So our virtual DOM, our DOM, can have a text. What else can it have? It can have another virtual node, which then has, in this case, another text. But it could be until, like, it can have as many children as necessary, or as you want, right? And then we have the third example, which is you have an array of these nodes. So like lists, or like just various items inside a container. Okay, so what do we need in order to build our own virtual DOM? So first we need a function to create virtual nodes. This is the H function that we saw here. We need something to mount this thing onto the DOM. So this just means creating like an actual DOM element and adding it to the actual DOM. And the reverse thing, just removing it, not just hiding it, but actually removing it from the DOM. And the last part is something called patch, when we want to update something. And this is where the magic of the virtual DOM comes in. Something changes, a value changes, and everywhere where this is needed, it updates by patching the DOM, by just applying these changes, so to say. All right, so it's live coding time. And yes, that guy gets it. Okay, so can everyone read it, the text? Is it big enough? Yes, okay, great. I can actually, was it this? Yes, a little bit bigger. Okay, so I will show you very swiftly my setup here. It's nothing like I have, well, let's just close this. Oops. So I have a regular HTML file with a little bit boilerplate here. I import Tailwind just because it's easier to style things here. And then we have like some, just to center the thing to make it a little bit more appealing. And then we have this app, this div or this container with the app ID. So this is where we are going to mount our application or our DOM. And then we have a, we import the H function, the mount function here from our Vue VDOM. We will see what's in there in a second. And then we just look for our app element here. And then we mount whatever is the VDOM here and onto that app. So the VDOM here isn't created yet. And I have some examples. But let's first see Vue VDOM. What is to import there? Well, nothing yet, because we are going to create all of this from scratch in a second. What else do we have in this project? So we have examples. And these we are going to use to step by step see what we need to add to our virtual DOM to, at the end up with, yes, a very simplified version of the Vue 3 virtual DOM. So there is a lot of assumptions that I'm going to make here that just make the thing more simple. But the goal of this talk is that you just see what is a virtual DOM, how it looks like, and just to demystify a little bit this whole topic. So we have a few different virtual DOMs here, from easier to a little bit more complex. And we will go through each and every one of these one by one. Okay, so let's just start by creating our virtual DOM. And this is a new virtual node, and this is, let's say, an h1. We don't put any properties, and we say hello world. And nothing will happen because we can already see there are errors. But let's just start implementing our virtual DOM. So we have a function that's called the h function. This is good. Then we have the mount function that we mentioned before. We have the unmount, and then we have the patch function. Okay. So we learned already the things that we need for this h function to create a virtual node. So this is a tag, the props, like attributes and stuff, functions, and the content, which we named children. I will just keep it like this. Okay. And then mount, what are we going to do? Well, we want to mount one of these virtual nodes that the h tag creates onto the actual DOM. So we expect a virtual node, and I call this container where we want to mount it onto. So in the simplest example is we saw before the container, the div with the ID app, that's going to be in the first run, our container in this case. And when we want to unmount something, we just need the virtual node. We don't need a container or anything because we can deduct it from our virtual node. We will see in a second how this works. And patch is we want to compare one virtual node with another virtual node. And we apply changes to the actual DOM compared, comparing virtual node 1 to virtual node 2. Okay, so the probably easiest thing to do here is to write this h function because it's a very, our virtual node has a very flat hierarchy, which is just like this, return the tag props and children, and then we already have it. That's all there is to this h function. It just creates an object that later we will add a few things there, or actually we add one thing there, which is a link towards the actual, the element in the actual DOM, which is going to be called L, but we will add it later. Okay, so this so far so good, but when we save it, nothing happens yet. Does not export named age. It does export. Don't I see something? Okay, now it works. Whatever. Okay, good. So now we have our virtual node here, and now we want to mount it. So the first thing is we want to create an element here, and we just use document.createElement. And this would be like h1, and then here the text, right? But we know what this tag will be because we have it in our virtual node. Remember, the virtual node here is the result of this h function. So we will have access to the tag here. So we will just write vnode.tag. And then the content will be vnode. No. Wrong. So we just create the element tag. And then we mount this thing onto the actual DOM, onto the container. So container.add, no, always wrong. Append child. Append, what are we going to append? We are going to append our element here. So let's see what happens. So nothing shows, but if we inspect this thing here, we open, blah, 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 and we can see it actually added the tag that we created. It just doesn't have a text or content yet because, well, we didn't write it. So let's just do that. Let's just say we have here our example, create h1 with, we just ignore for this first example the props. It will just have a text. Let's just assume for the moment, for the time being, that it's a text. So we go element.text, text content is, and is vnode.children. And there we go. We mounted this our first virtual DOM, a very simple one, onto our browser. So that's so far so good. So now we have, like, I will remove this here and we'll import a few, like for every example, I will import this from our examples files. So let's see the first example, what it is. So this is a test. And let me just open, no, okay. Here, examples. Okay, so our first example is pretty similar to what we had before. It's an H1. It has a text, but it also has properties here, and this we want to apply to this element. So we want to add some class with blue text, a bigger font, and so on. So what do we have to do here? So we have to add or set an attribute. So we just go element.set attribute. And it's going to be something like class, and then it's going to be the content here. Okay, and this is, so we have to iterate 5 minutes. Okay, we have to speed this up. Okay. So we have to iterate over the props, which is going to be for the key in vnode.props. Then we just apply this thing here. So the key, and then we have the vnode.props at the index of key. And we can see here in the actual DOM, this works, and it also is applied here in the browser. Very cool. So let's see our second example here, the VDOM 2, which is a button. Let's take a look at it, the examples. So it's basically what we already have. It's rounded, it's gray, so this works, but it's now a click function, and when you click it, we want to alert the rock sign, right? So, but when we click it, nothing is rocking. So this isn't working. So if we inspect this again, we see it's on click, and then it's just a string here, which does nothing. So why? Because we just told it to be a string. So let's just try, how could we do this? So let's just assume that when there is an event we want to have, it just starts with on index, on input, on click or something. So let's just try if the key starts with on, then we do a certain thing, and then if not, we do this. All right, so we see already here, we remove the on click, and because we entered here and it's not doing anything yet, but we need to do something like this, element.add event listener. It's going to be something like click and then the function. But what we have here is on click, and we want to have it like this. Is this contrast-wise? Can you read? I can read. Okay, so we need to make some text transformation here. So we just say event name is the key. We want to erase the first 2 characters, so just slice 2, and we convert it to lowercase. So this should be good enough. We just replace this. And what is going to be in there? Well, it's just going to be a function, so we can just use the same thing here. Save it. Oh, event listener. Okay, there we go. Thank you. And we click, and it works. So this is cool. Next one, we have to sprint a little bit. So here we have an object. Why is it an object? Let's see what we want here. Oops, in the examples. Well, because it literally is an object. It's just a virtual node. Okay, so what do we need to do here in this case? Well, we need to render it out again. So we need to mount it again. So this is going to be a recursive thing. So what we did here is, let's just copy this down here. So we just assumed this is text, but it's not always going to be a text. It can also be the type. Let's just see if the type of vnode children is a string, then do Q&A time. Okay. I will finish this example. I show you the code of the next, and then 10 minutes. Okay. We have some more time. Okay. So if it's, let's just say we assume if it's string, just add string. If not, it's let's just assume it's an object, and then we mount the object. So what do I want to do? Mount the virtual node onto the element. Does this make sense? No. You hold Q&A. Yeah. Mount vnode children. Thank you. Okay, so it works. It's now rendered out this way. So we had 10 more. Yeah, I will make one more example, and then I will be a little bit faster. Okay, so the next one is like a list of objects. So basically, what we did here is just an array instead of an object, and we just need to render each item out. Let's just load this here. We can see it doesn't work, but if we just assume here, else if it's an array, let's just test for array. Array.isArray vnode children. Then okay. Then, something already changed. It's good. Then we just iterate over all the items and we render them out individually. So basically the same that we did here, but for all of them because it's an array. So just vnode children dot for each. What do we have there? Child, and then we mount this child onto the element. And then we can see again that it works. Okay, because we are running out of time, I will just show you how it would be. So we have the next one would have been fun. So we have dogs, monkeys, and goats. And we want to remove here, we want to unmount the monkeys. And I think I have a resolved, well, it's an extended thing here, but what we basically would do is we ask the parents of the actual DOM element to remove the child, and then it would remove this element that we say it to remove. By the way, I will put up the GitHub repo so you can all take a look at this on at home. So the next one would be already the last one. The next one would be how to patch a function. So I won't code it out now because we don't have time, but basically what we are doing is this is the most complicated function that we have in our virtual DOM. So we check what is different. So is the number of items, is it shorter, is it longer? The number of attributes, we have to see, did an attribute change? Did the content just change of a certain item? And then there's a lot of if else, until we find out like the most optimum way to re-render this virtual DOM. So sorry for going over time, but this is basically it. You saw the most important part, which is just create a virtual node and then step by step add it to the actual DOM. So with that, just thank you. Here is the repo. You can take a look at the repository at home in all calm. It also has comments, so you can follow it step by step and see like, okay, this is how it works. Thank you.